How can two nations, separated by 1,000 kilometers and with no shared border, be locked in one of the world's most dangerous and persistent conflicts? This is the central puzzle of the rivalry between Iran and Israel. They do not face each other across a guarded frontier. Their soldiers do not stare at each other from opposing trenches. Yet for decades, they have been engaged in a relentless struggle, a shadow war fought through intelligence operations, cyber attacks, political assassinations, and proxy forces. This is a conflict waged in the shadows of other nations, from the hills of Lebanon to the waters of the Red Sea, and its consequences ripple across the globe, shaping the very future of the Middle East. The fight matters now more than ever because the shadows are receding. The undeclared war is threatening to burst into the open. Recent months have seen unprecedented direct military exchanges, shattering a long-held taboo. What was once a Cold War, managed through intermediaries and deniable actions, has heated to a boiling point. The rhetoric from both Tehran and Jerusalem has become more aggressive, more direct, and more alarming. The world watches, holding its breath as each side calculates its next move. The stakes are no longer just regional stability, they now involve global economic security and the terrifying possibility of a nuclear confrontation. This conflict is a complex tapestry woven from threads of ideology, history, and raw geopolitical ambition. It is a battle for regional dominance, a clash between two profoundly different visions for the Middle East. For Iran's revolutionary government, Israel is an illegitimate entity, a little Satan, and an outpost of Western influence that must be resisted and ultimately removed. For Israel, a nuclear-armed Iran represents an existential threat, a danger that cannot be tolerated. This fundamental opposition of worldviews leaves little room for compromise, fueling a cycle of violence that has become increasingly difficult to contain within its shadowy confines. Understanding this conflict requires us to look beyond the daily headlines of strikes and counterstrikes. It demands that we explore the historical roots of this animosity, the intricate network of alliances and proxies that define its modern battlefield, and the immense global stakes involved. From the clandestine operations meant to cripple Iran's nuclear program to the Houthi attacks on global shipping lanes, the fingerprints of this rivalry are everywhere. As of today, June 15, 2025, the question is no longer if a direct war could happen, but whether it can still be avoided. The answer will determine the fate of millions. It is a historical fact that can seem almost unbelievable today, but before 1979, Iran and Israel were not enemies. In fact, they were quiet, strategic partners. During the reign of Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, Iran was a pro-Western monarchy and a key pillar of American foreign policy in the Middle East. Sharing a mutual suspicion of powerful Arab states like Egypt and Iraq, Iran and Israel developed a pragmatic and surprisingly deep relationship. They cooperated on military matters, shared intelligence, and engaged in significant trade. Israeli agricultural experts helped develop Iranian farming, and Iranian oil quietly flowed to Israeli ports, fueling its growing economy. This de facto alliance was built on a foundation of shared interests rather than shared values. The Shah's Iran was a secular-leaning autocracy, while Israel was a parliamentary democracy. Yet in the cold, hard calculus of geopolitics, they found common ground. Both nations saw themselves as non-Arab powers in a predominantly Arab region, and both were aligned with the United States during the Cold War. Israeli military advisors helped train the Shah's notorious secret police, SAVAK, and joint projects were undertaken in technology and defense. It was a relationship conducted largely behind the scenes, but it was a real and functional partnership that helped shape the regional balance of power for decades. The cooperation extended beyond simple trade and intelligence. There were cultural exchanges and a sense of connection, particularly with Iran's ancient and historic Jewish community, one of the oldest in the world. The Shah's government was one of the first Muslim-majority nations to recognize Israel's statehood, even if it was only de facto recognition. This period stands in stark contrast to the unyielding hostility that defines their relationship today. It serves as a powerful reminder that the current state of affairs is not an ancient or inevitable feud. It is, instead, the direct result of a specific historical event that completely rewired the politics of the entire Middle East. This forgotten chapter of cooperation is crucial for understanding the depth of the change that was to come. The relationship was not a fleeting moment but a sustained partnership that lasted for more than 2 decades. The Shah's peacock throne and the modern state of Israel found themselves on the same side of the regional chessboard. The subsequent rupture was not a gradual cooling of relations, but a violent and total ideological reversal. To understand the shadow war of today, we must first grasp the alliance that was lost to the fires of revolution. A revolution that would redefine Iran's identity and its place in the world forever. The year 1979 was the watershed moment. The Iranian Islamic Revolution swept away the Shah's monarchy and with it, the entire geopolitical order of the region. The revolution was not just a change of government, it was a profound ideological earthquake. Led by the exiled cleric Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a new Islamic republic was established, built on principles of anti-imperialism, anti-Americanism, and a fierce opposition to Zionism. The United States, once Iran's key ally, was suddenly branded the Great Satan, and Israel, its regional partner, was recast as the Little Satan, an illegitimate Zionist entity and a cancer in the heart of the Muslim world. This ideological shift was immediate and absolute. One of the first foreign policy acts of the new revolutionary government was to sever all ties with Israel. The Israeli embassy in Tehran was summarily closed and handed over to the Palestine Liberation Organization, led by Yasser Arafat, who was welcomed as a hero. The slogan, "Death to Israel," became a standard chant at state-sponsored rallies, and the destruction of the Jewish state was enshrined as a core tenet of the Islamic Republic's foreign policy. This was not merely political posturing, it was a deeply held belief that shaped Iran's strategic actions for the next 4 decades. The new regime in Tehran saw the world through a different lens. It was no longer about pragmatic alliances or a balance of power. Instead, it was about a revolutionary mission to export its ideology and to lead a front of resistance against Western influence and its regional allies. Israel, with its close ties to the United States and its conflict with the Palestinians, became the primary target of this new worldview. The animosity was no longer about competing national interess, it was framed as a religious and civilizational struggle. This transformation laid the ideological groundwork for the long and bloody conflict that would follow. From that moment forward, Iran began to actively work against Israel's existence. It rejected any peace process, championed the Palestinian cause as its own, and began to build what it would later call the Axis of Resistance. The revolution did more than just turn a friend into a foe, it created an enemy whose very identity was intertwined with the idea of opposing Israel. The decades of quiet cooperation were erased, replaced by a permanent state of ideological warfare. The stage was set for a new kind of conflict, one that would be fought not on a traditional battlefield, but through a complex and deadly network of proxies. Unable to confront Israel's powerful military directly, Iran perfected the art of proxy warfare. This strategy allowed Tehran to challenge its adversary from a distance, bleeding Israeli resources and exporting its revolutionary ideology without risking an all-out war that could threaten the regime itself. Iran began to build its axis of resistance, a powerful network of state and non-state actors across the Middle East, who share its goal of confronting Israel and the United States. This network became Iran's primary weapon, turning the entire region into a potential front line in its long-distance war against the Jewish state. The crown jewel of this network is Hezbollah in Lebanon. Founded with the help of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in the 1980s, Hezbollah has grown from a small militia into one of the most powerful non-state military forces in the world. Iran provides it with funding, sophisticated weapons, and extensive training. In return, Hezbollah acts as Iran's forward operating base on Israel's northern border, possessing an arsenal of over 150,000 rockets and missiles, capable of striking anywhere in Israel. This creates a permanent and potent threat, forcing Israel to contend with a heavily armed enemy right on its doorstep, all directed from Tehran. Beyond Lebanon, Iran's support extends to Palestinian militant groups in Gaza, primarily Hamas, and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. While these are Sunni organizations, unlike Shiite Iran and Hezbollah, the shared enemy of Israel makes them crucial allies. Iran supplies them with funds, weapons technology, and training, enabling them to wage a relentless campaign of rocket attacks and other forms of violence against southern Israel. This strategy keeps Israel bogged down on another front, draining its military resources and creating constant pressure on its civilian population. all while maintaining a degree of deniability for Iran. The cycle of violence is self-perpetuating. Iran arms its proxies, the proxies attack Israel. Israel retaliates with airstrikes, assassinations, and ground operations, not just against the proxies but also against Iranian assets and personnel in places like Syria. Since October 2023, for instance, Israeli operations have killed thousands of Hezbollah militants and targeted Iranian commanders. Each Israeli response is then used by Tehran as justification to further arm its allies, portraying itself as the defender of the resistance. This creates a deadly feedback loop of attack and revenge, a shadow war that constantly threatens to ignite a wider regional conflagration. At the heart of Israel's strategic anxiety is one overarching fear: a nuclear-armed Iran. For Israeli leaders, this is not just a threat, it is, honestly, an existential red line. The prospect of the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, whose leaders have openly called for Israel's destruction, obtaining the ultimate weapon is considered, well, an intolerable scenario. This fear has driven a decades-long covert war aimed at sabotaging, delaying and dismantling Iran's nuclear ambitions by any means necessary. This secret conflict represents the most dangerous dimension of the entire rivalry, where the stakes are nothing less than potential nuclear annihilation. Israel's campaign has been multifaceted and relentless.
Subscribe for Part 2.